story of the little girl at the art gallery?
No.
Do you know her name?
No.
Is it Eve? Yes, it is Eve. One day, little Eve got all dressed up and ready to go to an art gallery with her parents. There were paintings, very realistic. There were statues, even prettier, and installations in the walls and floors. In the main room, there was a deep sea painting that looked like you could just jump right in and go for a swim. Eve walked around in silence, looking at the paintings, watching, just observing. You can all go sit. She was a very soft-spoken girl. Didn't speak much. Often lost track of time. And she had lost track of her parents. And then she looked around and realized that she lost track of everybody else in the gallery. She was completely alone. No sounds could be heard as she walked through the top floor, but she did see a note on the wall in blue paint. Does anyone know what that note said?
No.
It said, "Come see. Come down below. I'll show you something fun." So she walked down the steps and stopped at the bottom. And she did hear something. Something else. Steps. Maybe they were coming from another room, or down the steps after her. Suddenly, they stopped. She got into the main room and saw that there were footprints leading right up to the painting of the ocean that looked like you could just jump right in and go for a swim. And so, swoosh! She did. Everything was blue, but nothing was wet. It was as if she had entered a painting, which she had. She walked around and looked for a sign of another gallery goer, maybe her parents, maybe someone else she had seen along the way. All she found was a red rose that she plucked from a vase with a note that read, "This rose is the embodiment of your spirit. As it wilts, so do you. As you wilt, so does it." And she noticed that with every loss of a petal, she felt herself wasting away. So this rose was to be kept extra safe. Now, she continued through the halls, walking, occasionally calling out. She felt the eyes of the paintings watching her from their frames. And she thought she was with other people, but she wasn't. They were simply watching her as she went, maybe even reaching out of their frames to get her rose. But she kept it hidden and safe behind her back. What she didn't expect to find was a boy, sleeping, his eyes closed. Wake him up.
Wake up.
Wake up.
Wake
Oh,
up.
wake up.
Ahoy.
Boy held his head and shook it back and forth as if he was waking up from some sort of a nightmare. He looked around. He looked around. And then he saw Eve. Whoa! Dude, I'm not going to take your rose, Eve said matter-of-factly. And the boy rose to his feet. He was tall, much taller than Eve. As a matter of fact, he was a lot older. He said, "Who are you?" She said, "My name is Eve. I came to the gallery with my parents. Who are you?" The boy's name is Gary. And Gary was, in a word, frightening. He walked with a certain gait that attracted attention. He had a very strong face, dark eyes, dark hair. And he frightened Eve. But he was the only one she had seen from the gallery. The only one that she had seen looking at a painting, the one of the hangman, in the gallery earlier. So they stuck together, and despite how scary he looked, Gary promised, "I won't let anything hurt you. I will make sure you get out of this along with me." And so the two of them continued, mostly in silence, occasionally talking, and it became more of a maze. There were doors and passages that Eve had never seen before. And as they continued, they heard footsteps that ran and ran and ran and ran and ran until suddenly they stopped. And then ran again and whoa! Hi! A little girl tripped into their path. "Sorry about that," she said as she got her shoe back on. "My name's Mary." Mary looked at them with bright eyes. And immediately, Eve knew she liked her. She had the biggest, bluest eyes and the most gorgeous blonde hair that you've ever seen, pinned back almost unnaturally perfect. She was about Eve's age, maybe 9. And Eve joined her new friend on the floor. "My name's Eve," she said, holding out her hand for a shake. "I'm Mary. Pleasure to meet ya." Rising, Gary was a little bit suspicious, but said nothing. And so, the three of them continued. Eve and Mary, arm in arm, walking through the gallery, with Gary trailing closely behind. Two of them were inseparable. They talked about everything. You can sit. Thank you. Mary and Eve would talk about adults, and Mary hated people who were taller than she was, with a glare back to Gary. "They're adults. They're no fun." Eve smiled and agreed. "Yeah, adults really aren't that fun, but I do want to see my family again." "That's okay. We can get out and see your family together." The three of them walked on, continuing through the gallery, through the maze, avoiding the paintings, avoiding everything, until finally they came to a dead end with 2 frames on the wall. One, a wall-length painting of people in a pristine white art gallery looking at paintings. Looking closer, "There's my mom and dad," Eve said. She was looking out at the art gallery, at a painting so realistic, you could just jump right in. The second frame, on the opposite wall, was empty. But for a small title card. Do you know what that title card said? Mary, last work of artist Weiss Gertner's life. Rare, because Weiss Gertner never painted a real person. Upon seeing this, Eve turned back and looked at Mary and said, "Is that yours?" Mary nodded. "That's my frame." "Do you want to stay here? With me?" Eve looked at her rose, and then to Mary. Hers was a fake. There were only two of them, Eve and Gary, who had been in the gallery. "Well, do you want to stay with me?" Mary pouted and demanded an answer. "Come on, Eve, stay with me. We can play forever and ever, and we don't ever have to deal with any stupid adults." Gary, on the other hand, was frantic at the other end, saying, "Eve, come here. Don't you want to see your family again? I promised you we'd get out." So now I have to ask you, what does Eve do? Does she go with Gary? Or does she stay in the fabricated world?
Gary.
Eve looks at Mary, and then to Gary, then back at Mary, and she shakes her head and she says, "No, I can't. I have to go back to my family." "But you said you didn't like adults." Mary looked very angry. "You said you were my best friend. Aren't you going to stay?" Eve slowly inched back to the painting, shook her head, and said, "Goodbye, Mary." And the two of them, Gary and Eve, jumped through the painting. Wake her up.
Wake up, wake up, wake up.
Wake up.
Yes, she was in the gallery. A very small corner of the gallery. Quiet, secluded, and perfect for a nap.